Hello and welcome back to Popcorn Chat. Hope you guys are doing well. This week we're doing something different once again on this channel. I am doing a comparison between a book and its film adaptation. So in this week's video I am going to be comparing David Nicholls' Starter for 10 book, and then I'm going to compare it with the film adaptation with the same title that came out in 2006. Starter for 10 follows Brian Jackson, a young man who's recently got into university, who's very passionate about quizzes, and he goes to university to study English literature. Whilst there he finds a notice to join the University Challenge team, and through some trials and tribulations he manages to get onto the team eventually. Along the way, Brian learns more about himself and he goes out partying more. He falls in love with someone who may or may not like him back as well, whilst trying to keep connection with his family and friends back at home in Essex. So I saw the film originally, and I saw it about 7 years ago, and I mainly watched it because Benedict Cumberbatch was in it, and I was a big fan because Sherlock was around this sort of time, and I just went back and looked at loads of his filmography, and I was really surprised by the amount of amazing sort of cast in this film for a film which I'd never even heard of at the time. Since then I've seen the film multiple times. It's so enjoyable, it's only an hour and a half, it's really concise, so I find myself going back to the film quite a lot. It wasn't till this year that I actually read the book, so I got the book for Christmas from my friend Alex, so shout out to Alex, and this was mainly because I think I read One Day last year and I fell in love with David Nicholls' style of writing, and obviously I'd seen the film but I'd never read the book of Starter for 10, so I was so glad that I read this book, and I just wanted to make the video to talk about some of the few differences from the book to the film. So in terms of the book, one of the things that I noticed that was really different compared to the film was Rebecca and her accent. She's Glaswegian in the book, and obviously that's not translated into the film. Within the book I think Rebecca is a lot more of a sort of staple character. She appears a lot more, she is there with a lot more interactions when Brian goes into Alice's hall, because obviously Rebecca and Alice share the same sort of halls, so they have a lot more interaction within the book. Another main difference that I noticed whilst reading the book was when Spencer comes to visit Brian at university and he just sort of surprises him, he has a shaved head, and obviously Dominic Cooper doesn't do this in the film, so I thought him having a shaved head really worked for the character, especially in the book, and it's a shame they didn't do it in the film because I think it fits in with what he was going through at this moment in time. Even though I'd seen the film before and I knew the story, when reading the book I found myself quite emotional at times, especially when Brian takes Alice on that date into that Italian restaurant and he sort of blurts all out about his dad and, you know, how it impacted him, and I just felt really emotional in that moment, and when I watched the film afterwards I didn't really feel that connection there. Another moment where I felt quite emotional whilst reading the book was when Spencer gets into that car crash, that drunk driving accident, which leads Brian to come back home to Essex, and you know, he meets Spencer, Tone, his mum, all of that, and I thought just what Spencer said, I can't remember the exact sort of extract of what he says, but it was just so moving, and again I just got really emotional at that, and I haven't cried at a book in a long time, so to cry twice at this book, well done David Nicholls. So watching the film after reading the book, I was quite surprised how many sort of story beats and pivotal moments that they actually missed out in the film. One of the earlier moments in the story is where Brian meets Alice at the Tarts and Vickers party, but that doesn't happen in the film, and they meet at the Uni Challenge sign and she's like, I'll meet you there tomorrow. And that doesn't happen in the film, but I thought that was a nice little interaction that they missed out on, and rather in the film she just walks in and you get the sort of the male gaze with the camera. I just would have liked to have seen that interaction before the actual quiz. One of the other small things that they changed with the film was the fact that Colin got knocked over by a bus, but in the book he actually gets ill. I can't remember exactly what with, but I thought that was such a weird change. Like, I don't know why they had to change that, but that's just something I picked up on. One other thing which I thought was really important for the character of Brian within the book was the sort of acne that he has on his face, and that sort of is quite, you know, a prolific thing within the book, and they touch upon it a little bit in the film, especially when he's getting ready for the date and he uses like the apricot face wash, which obviously mentions in the book, but other than that, like, James McAvoy's skin is very clear, whereas I thought that was just something that added to his character and his sort of naivety of who Brian was. So I don't know, I don't think they could have done it with makeup or just found maybe a different actor, I'm not too sure, but that's just something that I would have loved to have seen in an ideal world. One of the most significant things they changed from the book to the film was the fact that Alice slept with Spencer when Spencer comes to visit Brian. Now in the book that is someone who is just in the drama that Alice has also playing a part in. And I think that's such a big character thing for them to change, for Spencer to do that. Whereas in the book, he's just like, you know, obviously that never happens, and he's just like, you know, I put in a good word for you. He's like, oh, I saw you chatting, but you know, there was nothing there. But in the film, they completely changed the character of Spencer, and obviously this leads him down a completely different path, and like, you view him completely differently. But in the book, I think you can understand Spencer's character a lot more, because obviously he didn't do anything. But yeah, I was really surprised by this change, and I completely forgot it happened in the film. So yeah, that's where I prefer the book, definitely, in that instance. And then my final note is the ending itself is very different. It finishes with Brian sort of writing this letter, and it ends up obviously that him and Rebecca have gone on this holiday. But in the film, he goes and finds her in the court at the university, and they kiss, and it's all lovey-dovey. But in the sort of the book, there's a bit more of a time jump, and you see the relationship a little bit further down the line. Which one do I prefer? I'm not too bothered, but I just thought, again, a very, very different ending. So after reading the book and rewatching the film recently, I'm gonna have to say I preferred the book. I know, that's such a typical answer that you don't want to hear, but it is the truth. Obviously in the film they only show those sort of key scenes, and the book obviously fleshes out those sort of in-between moments, and we see Brian going out a lot more, he's drinking a lot more. We have that whole situation, like I said earlier, where Spencer has a car crash from drink driving, and they also completely disregard the sort of initial relationship that Brian and Alice have. They sort of have this sort of hidden, you know, sort of romance going on. That's not touched upon in the film at all. So I definitely preferred the book and the sort of the details and the characterisation overall. I hope you guys liked this week's video of me bringing literature into my channel and comparing it with its cinematic adaptation. If you have any more suggestions of films that were books originally and you'd like to see me compare the two, then let me know in the comments, because I have a few ideas in mind, but I'd love to see what you guys would suggest. Thanks for joining me this week, and hopefully I'll see you next week for another Popcorn Chat.